and it's a black screen.
No, it takes about 30 seconds
Okay.
to have audio, so we need to mute our mic.
Oh, I'll do that right now. Well, okay, I think we're live. Hello, OPN. This is DJ VJ Girl, and I'm very honored to be here tonight for the 1 year anniversary of the Other Possibilities Network. We all know and love our OPN team, which is is made up of a lot of people, but tonight I have the honor of turning the webcam around on one of our favorite interviewers, Artister, and we're going to talk to him and get to know a little bit more about him and his background, what brought him to work in citizen media, and where he sees the future of all of us coming up in the next year, 2013. So I also want to give a huge shout out to the rest of the OPN team. Most of them are here tonight. That's Zena, Suze, Clearly, Ping, Grey Dog, Uppity, Krishna is Love, sorry Krishna, and Stratonimbus. So you guys all do a tremendous job. Most of you guys have been here since the beginning, and thank you for being here, and happy birthday. So with no further ado, I will bring in the man of the hour, Artister. Here we go. Hello, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. And we have such a big room, and so I'm nervous and anxious. So I'm not going to look over here at this computer. Let me change it. So I got my full attention on DJ.
How does it feel? You made it a whole year. I know that the running a live stream chan is quite a bit of work and a lot of effort.
Yeah, well, I was telling some people that, we started with Buddy Bolton last February, and it was just an idea we had. We kind of threw together, and I figured, well, you know how this stuff goes. We'll do a few interviews and maybe a month or so, and then it'll just kind of fizzle out by, whether or not there was interest generated or whether I felt like, I wanted to keep doing it. And it just kind of took hold and took off. So I'm actually, on one hand, surprised we lasted a year. On another hand, I'm very proud that we did. I feel really good about it. And as a working artist, at my work, some people were talking to me and they asked me to explain it. And I said, I have the largest body of work I've ever made, out of OPN because OPN is the art that I do. And so it's humbling and gratifying. And before we get too far into it and I forget, I want to thank all the guests we've had and all the participants, all the people that have been in the chats and everything, because, without you guys and without, you were on one of our panels and I saw, Courtney is in the channel and Lippy and a whole bunch of people who have been in on interviews. And without that, there wouldn't be a show. So it's a holistic enterprise and it takes everybody. So I'm really grateful and I'm humbled that everybody invested their time and energy in it. And I'm glad to be here. So we'll see if we can keep it going another month or two.
Another month or two. I think that's the short term. I think it'll be going for a long time. I think one of the really cool things about Other Possibilities Networks, which is reflected in its name actually, is you guys were really the pioneer of live stream channels that went in the direction of making live interactive interview videos. I know, like back in the camp days, there by default was a lot of people in the camp talking back and forth and some interviewing going on, but this format at the time that you started it was really new for the movement media. Do you think that presented specific challenges to, in the process of keeping it going? Is it a lot harder, do you think, than just restreaming live actions or using what's out there?
Well, I think it's a lot different. And, we're essentially creating content instead of having it come to us. And having done both, I streamed some at DNC and I've streamed a little bit out. And I know for a fact that my strength is not as a streamer. And I respect the people that are getting out there doing it every day, because it is a difficult thing in a bad environment to be out there with the camera 4, 6, 8, 10 hours, and in the early days just 24/7. So there are challenges. They're just different, you know. But our guests again are what makes it work. The reason that I chose this particular path is because I'm really interested in all the backstories. So even when I'm watching a stream of a protest or an action or an event, I want to know what's behind all that. And so we weren't getting it for any number of reasons, just because most people were doing what was in front of them at the minute. And so I felt like, well, the only way we were going to get backstories is to try to solicit them. And so we came up with a little kind of a system about how to do that. And I actually studied, I listened to a lot of interviews. I paid attention to interviewers I respect, like Amy Goodman and Diane Rehm, people like that, and just listened to how they would ask questions and what kind of questions they would ask, and tried to learn and incorporate that on the fly. And then as we have these conversations, I view it. Amy Goodman gave a talk, and she said new media, digital media, can be much like sitting around the kitchen table. It's the kitchen table of our generation. And I always approach that stuff like it's like an after dinner conversation, hopefully, when it goes well. So
Exactly.
different challenges, no more difficult, and maybe even easier because you're not dealing with so many environmental concerns as live streaming. But it's a completely different thing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just different.
Well, and you have a history and a little bit of. I'm really excited to get to this next part. Artister has a history of he's an artist, but he has been doing activist related performance art for quite some time. So I would love, with your permission, Artister, to play a video that you made several years before the Occupy movement came to conception to give people some idea of the kind of thing you were doing. Do you want to do a brief explanation or introduction to what this is going to be about?
Yeah, this is an event that I did in late summer 2008. Maybe it's actually probably the last week or so in August of 2008. And that summer, I had done a residency with Bread and Puppet, which is the puppet activism group up in Vermont. And this year is their 50th anniversary year, so they've been doing this for 50 years. And I went up and spent a summer living and working with them, and it's where I learned the most effective way for me to intersect art and activism. So when you go there, you're building shows, you're doing shows, you're rehearsing, you're performing, you're doing parades, you're doing all this. And when you go there, if you're engaged in it, you come away feeling that, okay, my mission is to do shows and to present them to the people and try to engage them in conversation or stimulate thinking. So this was the first show I did after my summer with them, and the text was actually an original Bread and Puppet text that I modified, but I did all the writing, producing. I made all the props to Canastoria that you'll see, and I did the performance. And that show, we crashed a fundraiser, and there was about 200 in the audience. So it was the first large scale independent performance I did, and I just kind of corralled. You'll see the chorus, and those were the people that I actually worked with and choreographed and practiced with, and everybody else is volunteers. So it's some mass confusion.
It's lovely. And did you do the costume design? I just have to ask. Before.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so here we go. You guys, this is worth it. This is very worth it. So here we go. Enjoy. Please play.
you have a help. There we go. There. So I'm gonna kind of look over to the side because I want to watch it too.
The Cacophony Circus proudly presents Flyers! What? Flyers! We're here to present flying lessons. You do not need permission to fly. You do not need approval to fly. All you need is a little courage! The courage to see possibilities! The courage to create and build! The courage to think for yourself. The courage to speak out. Hey, wait a minute! The courage
I actually performed a version of this somewhere near Montreal in French. We learned it in French phonetically.
Wow.
Hey, wait a minute! The courage to act. The courage to change. The courage to say yes whenever possible. Yes! The courage to say no whenever necessary. No! The courage to dig in the dirt. The courage to plant what is needed. And most of all, the courage to fly! The courage to remember the cues. All you people. All
And they weren't expecting this.
No, this is all like crowd command. And it's a second floor building, and there's 150 people above looking off on the
all you
balcony.
need is courage. Any more? Oh, yeah. Babies, come on.
And the guy with the beer is from the fundraiser?
Yeah.
Look at Slade.
Okay, gather up these people.
The dog with the cape is like my favorite.
I like your gloves.
Well,
They're not-
it's a
they're not.
craft school, and we have to practice proper safety techniques.
Of course.
I'm not responsible for his actions.
Responsible flying is important.
Now, can you believe all these people actually got out there and did
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
I was
I would've.
stunned. I was stunned. I figured that I'd be like the only goob out there with like the 4 people that I had drafted.
I love the yellow dishwashing gloves.
Baby back there.
Does everybody agree? Oh, yeah! Wait, I forgot the most important part.
because everybody, you can't fly without feathers.
Of course not.
You clearly.
Feathers or kitchen dishwashing gloves. And goggles help.
So we were becoming one, with the thing. And we have to do proper flying yoga because you don't want to hurt yourselves.
You don't want to pull a muscle or anything.
Plus, a lot of these people had never flown before, so we're having to teach them just the rudimentary
Flying 101.
Yeah.
This just makes me happy.
And that cackling laugh you hear is actually Mrs. Artister in the background.
Bonsoir, Mrs. Artister.
You gotta shake your tail feathers.
Looks like it's about to work.
Somebody else's goggles fogging up.
Uh-oh.
I love the guy in the overalls.
There he goes.
So it was like 85 degrees, and humid, and so I had done this, and I was taking them to fly, around the area there, and it's a little bit hilly, and it didn't occur to me how difficult it would be to run around flapping your wings and running uphill, and I almost didn't make it myself coming back up the hill.
You look like you're in top form, though. The world needs more of this.
Come on, man, you're almost there.
I'm running out of steam there. I look like an albatross. Yeah, so that sort of sums up what I did the years before Occupy as far as activism. I did stuff like this around just on this, we don't have streets where I live, so we would just go places and do it, in front of people. So it's just generated, the message of that is just try things, all it takes is a little courage, right?
Exactly.
So one of the things I tell everybody all the time is just trust your cape, and that's kind of where that comes from. And I actually really believe that. Sometimes you just gotta jump. So
It's half the
you
battle.
prepare. Yeah, you prepare a little bit, but
wear your rubber gloves and your goggles.
Yeah.
But courage. What I really like about this is obviously it's really entertaining, but it's interactive. I mean, you can't be witnessing this and not be happy or have a smile on your face, and you got people to join in, and I'm sure afterwards, what was the response from this group that you crashed? Were they
well, it was pretty raucous, actually. I mean, I thought it was well received, and the director of the school and the deputy director and all are just like kind of standing there in shock. But they were good sports about it and very complimentary, so it was a kind of a fun, good kickoff to the evening. And if I remember right, they had a fairly successful fundraiser, and everybody was like, this is what we come here to do and see, and why we want to help, support it, at the school we were at. So Yeah, it was well received. I was really pleased. That was probably the second performance I had done up there. I did a smaller one sometime before that for a smaller group that was well received. So people were pretty open to it. They didn't understand it. It's so foreign to their experience
Sure. It,
because it's just, around where in that environment there's the cult of the object, because it is a craft school, so it's object and materials based, and so experiential stuff or anything politically, anything with a message can be a little not daunting, but it's just not in the normal flow of things. So it's good to inject that every so often, I think.
Well, and that's what art is all about. I mean, in my opinion, that's what art is all about. Is it's in connecting with other people and communicating an emotion, and performance art is particularly effective at that sometimes. And that brings me into kind of another topic I wanted to start out with you because your background is activism and also art. I wanted to talk about early on. I read an article that asserted that Occupy Wall Street in its infancy was primarily a movement of artists, and that what was being attempted in the camps, early camps of Zuccotti, etc., was kind of a living social art. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that and see how you got involved with Occupy Wall Street and what you think the connection is.
Yeah, well, first, I want to speak to the living social arts part of it. I think early on, one of the things that drew me to it, that there were a lot of artists and builders and makers involved because, Zuccotti especially being the focus point, there at the beginning, they were creating something out of nothing in that part. They were literally building a functioning village with infrastructure and all the things that go along with that. And at my very core, I'm a builder and a maker, and I really believe in that. And it was gratifying that it was being built and developed with a sense of whimsy and fun to merge together with the degree of seriousness of the subject matter that was being addressed. I mean, I think the progressive left movement, or however you want to define it in the United States, is we're in a death struggle now. But we have to remember that you cannot live under duress, that there has to be some fun and some joy. In the early days of the encampment, you could see that. I mean, it was radiating and it was popping. So I think that's what kind of drew me to that. I had heard some whisperings around, across the internet and everything, because I'm so remote. That's about the only way I can figure out what's going on outside the world. And then when the park was occupied, like everybody else, I was just glued to the screen, right? It was just the most fascinating thing that I had ever seen. And it was so energetic and so vibrant, and there was something happening 24/7. And I felt like so many other people did, what we were seeing was the germination of a new possibility. So the roots were being laid down, and they were being laid down in such a positive and progressive manner. And the artists, and my definition of art is fairly broad. So my art is, cardboard and Sharpies all the way to the most finely crafted object, and everything in between. It's the music, it's the dancing, it's the conversations, it's the drummers, it's all the 2D and 3D artwork. And also, I think the very act of placing a tent in a compound adjacent to other tents is a work of art. And if you look at some of the pictures from Zuccotti and from all the other encampments, if you look at them purely as an artwork, the variety of texture and hue and color, even if people don't realize that's what they're doing it. It's coming out of their soul, and so it's creating. So that's what drew me in. And the whole thing of creating a new society and building something out of nothing and using the resources to do it.
Do you feel that that's been carried on with any success since the camps were closed? Or do you think that's been our
Um,
challenge?
what my opinion is that the artistic element of it lost steam over time. One, because it's difficult to maintain, and two, because of all the pragmatic and logistical challenges that were involved. I mean, when you're in a situation where you're trying to scramble to keep warm and find enough food to feed everybody and keep the police from beating you in the head and all that stuff, the art naturally will fall by the wayside. But you see these, spontaneous outbursts of joys of expression through all the camps, not just Zuccotti. And one of my favorite examples is Barry out of Occupy DC, the guy that made the beautiful cardboard signs, the hand lettered cardboard signs. And they were just like, they were pithy and just beautiful as an object. And, the messaging was dead on. And that stuff would happen, randomly all over. And it always made me feel good to see that, because I think you need, in the face of darkness, you have got to have some positive energy, or else you'll just drown into darkness. And so I kind of look towards, that's one of the obligations and responsibilities of an artist or a creator, is that's what they can contribute,
Sure.
right? I mean, it's not the only thing they can contribute, but I think it kind of, that lost steam over the course of the movement. You can see it occasionally revived, but I actually think, in my opinion, I would like to see it proportionally, 40, 50% of an event, I think, would be effective for art, because you can engage people with art, with your message, and draw them into the conversation as an entry point. So I think we kind of tailed off, and I would like to see it picked back up. And that's what I try to do, and I'm very supportive and encouraging of people to do. One of my favorite ongoing groups is OTS in New Orleans, Occupy the Stage, because they still, to this day, everything they do has a performance or an artistic component to it. And they're out in the street every week doing something to engage the community, but it's coming at an angle, at a non-threatening angle, with an artistic element, and to get people engaged. And I think that's really valuable.
I do too, and it's not just engaging them. I think when you get people to take part in art, you're empowering them. Art is primarily, I think, a very when you are creating something together. Uh, it's very unifying, and it's very humanizing, and it builds relationships, and it builds compassion and understanding, and you have fun together, and you laugh together, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and it's challenging. It's personally challenging to create art. So when we do those things together as a group, and when we include them in our movement, we're strengthening ourselves and we're empowering ourselves. So it's not even just for letting off steam. I think it's incredibly important to morale and unity personally. So
Right.
so right
Well, I
on to
think
that.
one of the best examples of that, I mean, I'm a big fan of Code Pink and everything they
Oh, me
do,
too. Yeah.
but everything they do has a creative element to it. And you cannot deny the effect they have or the seriousness of the issues they're dealing with, but they always come at it with a creative element that is critical to the whole event or the whole action.
Uh, Another really a cool thing that I've noticed in the last 6 months is the have you seen the Overpass Light Brigade
Yeah,
actions?
yeah.
Those are fantastic. I mean, so brilliant, and such a simple concept, but wonderful, wonderful impact.
Right, and Illuminator is another example. Look at the effect that they have. I mean, people go nuts over Illuminator. They project their messages, and 30,000 people see it, and they're just like in awe and in love with it. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's really inspiring, really productive and valuable, I think.
Yeah, I think that kind of segs into. I want to talk a little bit more about you now, and the way that you've been approaching. I think everything that you've been talking about here, your art in the past. I know you're a teacher. You teach art at a art and crafts college. You have started OPN and been, as we discussed earlier, creating content versus just catching it. And not that just catching it is easy, but I think creating it, taking it a step further, especially early on, because, like I said, you were one of the first channels to start this format. I want to talk about now, like what where you're at. And I know I've seen the video for the OPN 2.0, and I want to know more about what's in the future for OPN.
Yeah, well, I was looking back over some of this stuff, in December and January, just trying to get my head around where we were, because it's a lot of work. And for a long time, we were doing 2 and 3 shows a week, and the prep work for that, because and I want to make it clear, it's like, I'm nobody special. I'm not that smart. I think I'm reasonably motivated, but I'm not like an overzealously motivated person. And so what we do for these shows, I firmly believe anybody could do it. And there's a lot of people that could probably do it better. And you just have to invest your time and energy in it. But so I think where we were, especially early on with we had the big team. I mean, everybody was working. I mean, we were out, contacting guests, and we had this whole email system. And I mean, you experienced all that, and the women's streamer panel, which will never do 9 people at one time again, because that was just, man, that was something. But there's a lot of work that goes into preparing just to do an hour show. And actually, there's as much work in a 45-minute to an hour show as there is in a 2-hour show, because it's all groundwork and preparation. And I respect the guests, and I value their time and their willingness to speak. So I spend a lot of time preparing. For most of the first year, I would say until October or November last year, we would interview anybody that we could get that I thought was compelling and had a good story to tell. And I got in way over my head really fast. We started out interviewing mostly streamers and people who are working in the field, and I'm kind of conversant about that, so I could ramp up on it pretty quick. But then we started getting people like, we got Captain Lewis, and we talked to Margaret Flowers and Kevin Zeese, and we talked to Ed Greistar on single payer healthcare. I mean, stuff that I am not conversant about. And we were doing 2 and 3 of these shows a week, and the amount of reading and information I had to do just to be able to ask an intelligent question was unbelievable. And so the team were very supportive, because we'd have a Wednesday show coming up, and on Monday I'd be like, oh, I can't do this. This is so far over my head. I can't do it. And they're like, oh, no, you can do it. I'm like, no, really, these people are really good, and I can't do this because I can't even ask an intelligent question. But the guests were very gracious and very generous with their time and energy, and I always tried to be prepared, so I wasn't wasting their time. So we did this subject matter all the way from a streamer talking about their experience to single payer health care to education. I interviewed professors from San Francisco State University, and I forget this school in Princeton, the professor, Zeese and Flowers, for example, and just on and on and on. And so the scope, I mean, really, I had this intention of having like thematic weeks, but it fell apart because the scheduling was so hard. And so, okay, we would do something on permaculture this week, and we do something on single payer healthcare following that, and something on art following that, and it just was like this mismatch. And at the end of last year, I was just tired, because we were deep, but we were really broad. Mm-hmm. And I felt like we were getting to a point, because my ultimate goal with this is I say I want to teach and inform, not because I know the answers, but I want to find stuff and share it with all our people, right? Just to help stimulate thinking. I don't know the answers. I just know there's a lot of problems out there, and there are a lot of solutions, and nobody's talking about the solutions. So I figure, okay, well, I can at least, that is my gift that I can give everybody. That's my art. I will make shows about solutions, and I will give it to everybody to do with as they will. And the benefit of doing this from an artist perspective and artist standpoint, I have made objects. I used to make sculpture, and I never could make a living at it. So I was used to not getting any payback for the, so it was
training.
it was just, that was normal for me, so I could do these things and invest all this time and not get any kind of remuneration or anything from it. But I felt like every show that I do, I want to reach one person. And I don't know who that person is, and it doesn't matter, and I never know, but you do your best and you throw it out there. But we were wide. I'm digressing. You got to rein me in. So we were wide and deep. And I said, I can't, I was getting, I was tired, and I have a day job, and, I got the whole house and family thing. So I'm juggling all this stuff. So I said, okay, I need to focus down on this a little bit. So what are my particular passions that I think are valuable to share? And that's where the 2.0 idea came. And we kind of started doing that in November. I talked to the folks that help, and I said, I got to get it down to food, shelter, education, and communication, because that affects everybody. Food affects everybody. Shelter affects everybody. Education affects everybody, because I think that's going to be the root of all the solutions. And communications, how we convey information, how we convey knowledge, and how we share it is so important. I said, okay, if I do nothing but those four things, that'll last me the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
There's more than enough to pull for. So that's where 2.0 came from, and that's the direction we're going in this year, is to really focus on that. My background, I grew up in a small rural community, on a small family farm. We grew all our own food. We had all our own animals. I've butchered cows and hogs and chickens, and we had a smokehouse. The whole deal, right? And it was subsistence permaculture, but back then it wasn't called that. It's just what people did.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was anywhere else. And so now, coming back to it at this time of my life, I'm renewing all those interests. Like, how can we do things sustainably, and not just on an agricultural level or a food supply level, but how do we sustain doing live streams? How can we make it so we can keep it going and build on it? So that's kind of where we're headed going forward, I think, ideally.
I think that's a great direction, and I really want to congratulate you for your energy and your consistency, because just doing this little show, which is one little show, which is 1/1000th of what you did, 1/100th of what you did, it is a lot. It's a lot to think about technically, and getting a little background, et cetera, et cetera. So I hats off to you for doing this. I know it took a village, and I know you had a lot of support, but I think it's still an amazing feat, and I really, really am looking forward to seeing what happens in the next year. So I have a couple of little questions that I have to ask that were on my mind, and one of them is, I want to know what your favorite show was, or what your favorite moment in a show. And I know that's probably difficult, because you probably have a lot. And then I also, when you're done, I want to know what your most challenging moment was, or what you were most frustrated, or et cetera, by.
I can't pick one thing. I can pick moments, and I can pick, the moments where people would speak so passionately. Captain Lewis, for example, how he spoke so passionately and eloquently. And I will say, to preface the rest of the commentary, I don't always agree with everything a guest is talking about, but I respect the fact they're invested in it, and I try to listen and learn from it. So, because we're getting information at all different angles. And this is not because it's recent, even though it was, but one of my favorite things I've heard out of all this awesomeness that people have shared with us. I mean, people are very generous, and they're very forthcoming. The teachers work to educate us. The activists are passionate about their causes. But when we did the Martin Luther King Day special, we showed a movie, and then we got a chance to interview Ruby Tuesday, who's one of our longtime
Love
supporters
Ruby.
and chatters. And so, she said, yeah, I'll talk. And the reason we wanted to talk to her is because her dad worked with Martin Luther King, which was in itself fascinating,
Yeah.
right? And so she was telling us a story, and her dad was like a communications guy, like radio and TV back in the day. And so, and I'm summarizing here, but essentially he went to work with Martin Luther King because he believed in the cause, and bless him for doing that. And the man wrote a dozen books, and they're phenomenal. He was quite a character, and very committed and very focused. But she told this story. She said her dad would be on the front lines of all these protests, walking around with like one of those big kind of reel-to-reel tape recorders that you carried on like a shoulder bag, and a microphone, and that he would be out there recording live, when all this stuff was going on in Montgomery and Selma and Memphis and all. I mean, so he's catching it live, and then he would go to a payphone and drop nickels in the slot, call a radio station that he would be connected with because he was a media guy, right? He had all these relationships all over, and said, okay, this is happening. You have to put this on the air now. And he had a speaker, and he would hold the phone to the speaker, and they would broadcast this stuff live on the radio. Ruby's dad was the first live streamer.
That's what I was just thinking.
And it just goes to show nothing we're doing is new. The tools are different, but the idea and the necessity and the need of it is so important. But we are standing on the shoulders of people who came before. I'm sure somebody back in the day was carving in a stone tablet.
The caveman
getting
protest.
the word out, right? It's like the precursor to newspaper. But can you just picture this guy in Selma, Alabama, in 100-degree heat with the cops and the dogs, and he's there just like a live streamer, and he goes to the phone booth to file his story live. I mean, it just don't get any better than that, And there's 1,000 examples like that through all the interviews, And the interview we did with the professor from Massachusetts, I can't remember his name, but the Bread and Roses strike in Lowell, Massachusetts, and how that community came together, and they broke the textile mills from all the oppression and abuse just by banding together in the worst conditions. I mean, immigrant communities from all over at the turn of the century, right? They couldn't even speak the same language. It was like the first instances of the human mics being used. And they would do their assemblies, and they would read their draft components, and they would repeat it in every language of every person that was on. These things went on for hours. And it's like, man, we can look to history, and we can learn so much about how to do things and how not to do things. And we as activists have a strong tradition. And I think that's what I've learned in interviewing, so many of these people. And one of my personal challenges is, how do you get up every day and keep doing it? I mean, in the face of insurmountable
I'm sure nobody
odds,
feels that way. I'm sure it's only you.
And and honestly, my part in it isn't that difficult, right? I mean, I spent a week at DNC with the streamers, and we lived and worked together, and they just ran me into the ground, and they have been doing it for a year. And so it's mentally and physically grueling and emotionally taxing. And then that was a benign environment. I can't imagine what it's like to be, confronted with the police every day and all that stuff. But it's like, how do you get up and fight the good fight every day? And I look to people who I have enormous respect for. See some George Lakey, Professor Lakey, who has been doing this since the early 60s and has gone through everything. Keith McHenry from Food Not Bombs,
I love
relaying
food
his
not bombs.
story. For these people have been doing it 30, 40, and 50 years, and they still get up and do it every day because they believe and they're committed and they find a way. And so these are the things that I took away, positively. And so when I start feeling sorry for myself, I'm like, suck it up. I can look back to these people now who I perceive, even though I don't know them personally, haven't talked to them, as activist mentors. Um, I read a lot. We touch around on Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky a lot. We watched the Howard Zinn movie during one show, and the things that man did. Such a quiet, strong person. The lessons we can learn there. So that's kind of a summary. I mean, it doesn't even touch the tip of the iceberg. I could go interview by interview, if I had the list in front of me and say, oh, yeah, I remember they said this, I remember they said that. And, that stuff, sticks and absorbs. So I like that. And as far as the challenges, the things, I don't think we have ever had a difficult or a bad guest. Um, I'm always grateful for anything they contribute. The things that make me crazy, the worst moments are like when the tech stuff just blows up and people wait, and the feeds are bad and you're trying to accomplish something and the guest is there and it keeps dropping, and I just like, I was like, I feel like this is my job to solve all this. And so there's been some fairly epic disasters around that. And I learned I would take it really seriously early on, but later on I learned that okay, it's going to happen, and
Expect it.
I'm fairly good at recovering from it and helping the guests recover from it, and it's okay. It's imperfect, and I am quite comfortable with that. And I have failed so much at so many things in my life that it doesn't faze me a bit. I just go, okay, well, that sucks, that happened, and let's fix it. The other part is, if I get into something and if I'm not well prepared, uh, for whatever reason, then I feel like that's a failure on my part, and I'm not really happy about it. So I'll end a show and I'll go, oh man, I just was not on it like I should have been.
Have you
Um,
have you felt that way? I mean,
yeah, I've had shows where some of the team has had to talk me down for an hour after,
really? Huh.
because I'm like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done this, because I'm fairly self-critical. I'm and to give a shout out to the team, I know I'm not easy to work with either, because I'm like, boom, 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 and I kind of get impatient. But I try to be thoughtful and conscious and know that that's my baggage. But I can kind of come off abrupt or short fuse sometimes, and I don't really mean that. Mostly it's frustration with myself. But if I have an interview that I feel is flat when I know the guest is good, I feel like it's flat because I didn't create an environment to bring the best out of the guest. And I take that very seriously. So, the things I can look back at that I wasn't pleased with were almost always because of something I did or didn't do.
Interesting. I just want to tell you that I don't think I've ever seen a show that I thought was flat. So I'm sure that you're difficult on yourself, as so many of us are. The other thing about having imperfect shows, or being a little nervous at first, or having technical difficulties, is for me, I think the blessing involved with that is it shows people that we're all human, and that we're all gonna do this sometimes and look silly or say something silly or do something not attractive, and that we can still do it. We can still go on. Most of the people watching are friends in sympathy with the reason we're here and are really supportive. And the idea is, is this is media that I can see, Ping T and Clearly and Zena and Barnabas Collins in real time, conversing with us. So yeah, so there's some really great questions on the pad here.
Before we get into them, because I don't want to forget this, I want to thank you for doing
Oh,
this
are you kidding?
while we still have a good crowd in the room. Because for those of you guys who don't know, DJ is way far away, and it's like in the wee hours of the morning, and she got up this morning so she could do this live with us, and I'm grateful. And you've been a joy to work
Oh,
with.
same.
And you're fantastic, and it means a lot to me that you would take the time and do this. So thank you for that.
I'm honored to be here, Artister. I'm really happy that you asked me to do this. So thank you very much. Okay, so we have a really great question. I don't know who this is from. Liberty? I don't know. If you had an autobiography written, what would be the title?
Always trust your Kate.
Always trust your cape. Oh, cape or cape?
Cape.
Cape,
Yeah.
as in like flying paraphernalia. Great.
Yeah.
Any suggested reading online since my local libraries lack any meat? Anything
Well,
off the top of your
I
head?
have that same problem where I live because I'm a big reader, and in our little counties, the libraries, through no fault of their own, they're underfunded and understaffed, and it's just the nature of the business. I think right now my favorite and most compelling read is Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. I am a firm believer that we as a society, the population in the United States, and as a culture, are A, not familiar with our history, and B, we don't respect it enough. There's great lessons to be learned. So I read a lot of history. A few weekends ago, I spent the whole weekend reading articles on the history of the Supreme Court of the United States and the Powell memo, the Lewis Powell memo from 1971, and all the background on that. Because I think it's important to understand how we got to be here.
Sure.
Because it's so screwed up. And I, if I can just digress a little bit and make this point, the problems and the issues we're dealing with are not new. Some of these problems are 3,000-year-old problems,
Yeah.
but the way that they are played out in our culture is fairly recent history. I don't believe in conspiracy theories or anything. That's just my thing. I don't believe in them. Other people do, and that's fine. I respect that. But there is no denying that there has been a categorically organized assault on the working class over the last 40 years. You can look at it, for laws that have been enacted, Supreme Court decisions. I mean, these are facts, right? I like dealing with facts. And so you go back and you read the history of the Supreme Court and you go, well, no wonder it's screwed up. And you read the Lewis Powell memo, who Lewis Powell was some big-time lawyer for Big Tobacco in Richmond back in the day. He wrote this memo of how to construct a frontal assault on the left, and he wrote that in 1971. He was asked to be on the Supreme Court several times prior to writing the memo. He turned it down because he was making so much money as a tobacco lawyer. He wrote this memo. 2 months later, he accepted an appointment to the Supreme Court. The memo was never discussed in the hearings, and that memo takes us back to the very beginning of the groundwork that was laid with Cheney and Rumsfeld, the Reagan years, all the way up through Bush. It is an outline of what is transpiring today. And it was worked, the right is well organized, they're well funded, and the strongest weapon they have against us is they know that the progressives and the left cannot get organized. They bet on it every day, and it's true every day. They have a system, they have a plan, and they are evil, and they're implementing it, and you see it every day. Today in North Carolina, the North Carolina State Legislature voted on allowing permits for fracking exploration. Part of the bill that was introduced into legislation was to fire the coastal resources regulator and the NC Natural Resources Regulator, which are the oversight agencies for consumer and health protection around those industries, and it was included in the bill, and it'll pass by a 30% margin because that's just the way it works. And so these agendas have been thought out way in advance. And I would argue by the time we hear about any of it, and I know we have these discussions, I'm in the minority, by the time we hear anything about it, it's already happened. We're just hearing about it. It's a done deal. And so all the protests in the world, all the responses of the people, it isn't going to matter. We got to get ahead of the curve. And the only way we can get ahead of the curve is go back and look at history and figure out the mechanisms and how this stuff happens so we can keep it from happening again.
Yes.
So that's a long answer to the reading list. People's History of the United States, and read history. Just pick whatever topic you're interested in, permaculture, law, politics, read history and biographies and figure out how in the hell we got here. Also seek out people you respect as role models or mentors, not saying to adopt their positions or their philosophies, but to learn how they did them so we can incorporate them and enact them on our own personal level.
Yep.
But read is important.
Read and pass it on. Read and pass it on.
Right.
I'm going to read those memos now. I'm really interested in your description. So that kind of brings up another thing that I had in the back of my mind. Looking at Occupy, or the general, I don't want to just confine it to Occupy, but looking at the activist movements in general right now, Idle No More, Occupy, all the no tar sands, no KXL, etc. Where do you think we can do better? I mean, and this question isn't to knock anyone down. What I'm looking for here is, we've been around as the Occupy movement now for a little over a year and a half. And we've definitely hit a wall. I think you talked about, the right counts on the left just not being able to organize. They also count on the left not being able to unify, at least not strongly enough, long term enough to force real change. We haven't for almost 50 years. So I want to know where you think we can do better. And I also want to know where you think we can do better in the media portion of that. I don't want to self-obsess on what we do, but I do think it's really important that we keep improving this online live stream interactive citizens journalist program, so that we can use it to communicate and do outreach. So sorry, that was a long question, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so that's I want to break it into two questions. The first part is, what can the movements do better, and the second part is, what can media do better.
Great, perfect.
Or else I'll get it all tangled up. So first of all, the movements, and you keep in mind this is all just my opinion and observations, and I'm bound to say something that's going to upset somebody, so I want to apologize in advance. That's not my intent. I'm just saying this is how I'm viewing the world, right?
Oh, get in line. Everyone's upset with me right now, so you'll have to be the second. Go ahead.
So just to go back a little bit on Occupy at its inception, I think we learned a couple of things from it. One is that the general population are starved for something to shake loose. That much is obvious. I think Occupy at its inception was really a good spark. I believe sincerely we had an opportunity there, say between September and November, to really coalesce, come together, to build a unifying force to address some of the issues. I am an organizational logistics nerd, so I'm always looking at, okay, how do things fit together and what's the most effective way to get something done because I like to get stuff done. And I think through any one of 100 different circumstances, the potential for Occupy to be a fairly significant progressive force kind of evaporated. We missed our window of opportunity. Some of it was our own fault, and I say ours, all of us that were involved in Occupy. And some of it was just incidental. Some of it was the response of the powers that be, because they recognized it as a powerful force. And if it ever coalesced, it was going to be a sad day for somebody, right? So I talked to a lot of people about this, and I think so much of it is being able to accept this variety of ideas and interests and be able to allow the environment where all of them are equally valid, even if your area of interest is not my particular area of interest, it's still valid, because ultimately all of us, no matter how much we fight and bicker and all the division and blah blah blah, those of us that are sincerely committed, and this is all over the world, we just want a better life. And we want a better life for ourselves. Fundamentally, that's what everybody wants. That's what the mass of people. I've been 3/4 of the way around the world twice. Everywhere I've been, the average person in the street always wants the same thing, no matter what language or religion. They don't want to be hassled. They want enough to eat, and they want a roof over their head, and they want security for their family. Security being not military or police state kind of security, but they want to be able to move freely in their society without threat to their family or their harm. I mean, that's all they want. Everybody wants the same thing, and we forget that, because once you start stripping that, what that is defined by, what do you think that is? What do I think it is? Then it becomes like, whose thing is more important and all that. And I went from thinking, because I evolved in my thinking of this, I went from thinking, oh, we need a unified focus. We have to have one message. And it was just me trying to impose my idea of structure on the environment, how I organized information and made sense out of the world. But I have evolved to go, I think it's not only is it okay and desirable for everybody to be able to work on their particular passionate issue, but as a tactical move, it's brilliant. Because if the powers that be are monolithic, and if you start attacking them on 100 different fronts, they're going to be scrambling, because they don't know how to respond to multiple entry points, which is why, literally every action the powers that be take is to kettle people. That's why they do it physically, because you can control them. If you can focus everybody into one point, either physically or metaphorically, they're more easily controlled and dominated. So there is a great strength and value in the disparity of our interests and passions. We should maximize that, and I think we can do better. Now we're getting to the do better part.
Good.
We have to concede. We have to concede the points we lost. We can't rub our head and go back in time. We don't get a do-over. We had this chance, we screwed it up, things happen. Okay, fine, just get over it. But you mentioned all the groups. Now I still say ultimately everybody wants the same thing. I don't know more wants the same thing that the remnants of Occupy want, the
N15,
a billion peas and rice, and just pick a country. Everybody still wants the same thing. So it's what we can do better is allow people the latitude to work on their passions and to share our resources better, to integrate better. And I really have gone to the idea of powerful affinity groups. And it's not that everybody has to agree on everything or participate in everything all the time, But if, let's say, if there's a Chicago's teachers union march, or an action, or right now, one of the stories that nobody is on top of is in Chicago. Every night there's meetings with thousands of parents and teachers fighting privatization every night, 5 days a week. They're having, but nobody hears about that. So I look at that and go, okay, what can the permaculture people offer that? What can Idle No More people offer that? And what can those groups offer to Idle No More, and building relationships and networks? And I envision, Uppity, when we interviewed her, and I hope she's watching tonight. I'm not watching the chat really good, but she told a story because she's a big farmer / gardener, and we were talking about the self-organizing principles of slime mold.
What?
Slime mold.
Slime mold. Okay. Wow.
And how when slime mold is attacked, like you're trying to clean it, then the very nature of it is it starts banding together to address the assault on the core of the problem, right? Uh-huh. And it's kind of in and out and in and out. When it's necessary, all the little bits of slime mold come together and make one big bit. But when it's not necessary, they all go to be in their own little bits of slime mold again. And I'm like, that's it. Because I view the world not linear and not even necessary horizontally, but organically. And the great power is in the networks. And the strength of the networks is in the nodes. So I say the Idle No More node, the Occupy node, the M17 node, the
no KXL.
Just pick one. But there's all these nodes, and they're all kind of floating. But we need to cross those paths, and the intersections where those nodes come together is very strong. So I think that's what we can do better, is like say, okay, well, I don't really know any, like I've worked with some folks in Asheville, and one of the women there is really involved in the prison justice movement here in this state. And like, what do I know about prison justice? But I also work with a group that does these big community gardens projects. And so turns out the prison justice woman wants to do community garden projects in the prisons. And so I say, okay, I know who you need to be talking to. And then like I try to get these people together, and there's that intersection, that one intersection to where everybody gains value from. And it's I don't think people are typically conditioned to think that way. Culturally and socially and educationally, we're taught to operate pretty linearly, but I'm saying, maybe to take our organic natures and use that as a tactical advantage as opposed to a disability, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense, and it also sounds to me like what you're saying is, do what it is you're really, really passionate about, and make it strong, and be ready to be ready for that moment when what you're passionate about and what your action is, be it environment, be it politics, be it media, be it research, has an opportunity to merge with another group on an issue and be strong. Is that correct? So combining our strengths, as opposed to trying to fit everything into one big movement that is going to struggle more.
And I want to add just a little side note to that. I also think there's great value in being small. And I think our predisposition is to being spectacular and big. And I think that, I mean, for any movement, I'm talking way beyond Occupy here, but especially in the United States, there's this predisposition to operating on this grand scale, this spectacular scale. And I personally believe every solution that we have to the global problems are going to have to be local. like, we're going to have, we interviewed Courtney Baines from the School of Sustainability at Appalachian State. And when she was giving her closing notes, I said, what advice do you have to activists? And she said, start at home. And I said, oh man, that makes so much sense. So you start within the people you can reach, right? And you start improving things that way. And literally, I mean, we say grassroots all the time. We have the climate change rally in DC, and there's 50,000 people there, and like it's this big thing. But would it not be equally, if not more effective, to have 25 people in your little community come together and actually accomplish one small, tangible, not theoretical thing, but a tangible thing that led to progressing that whole discussion on climate change? Like something that's, planting a garden, or changing over the 4 county vehicles to, propane or natural gas or biodiesel or whatever, but just doing something on that very small scale, because the concept behind that is, if I do it, it's 4 vehicles, so what? But if 500,000 people in the United States do it each in their little communities, then you got something.
Yeah.
You have that. And so I think, I just finished reading Schumacher's Small is Beautiful again. It can apply to economics, to social systems, to all that, and that there's great value in operating on a small scale, and it can be more encouraging because you get a direct result for your effort.
And it's less daunting, I think, too, to
right.
Anyone can try to organize a neighborhood garden with 3 or 4 neighbors, as opposed to planning a gigantic protest against, Shell Oil or something. Not everyone feels capable of doing that, even though I do believe everyone is. So, I completely agree. That kind of reminds me when I was doing a little research on you, on Artistor.
Oh, you researched me?
Well, no, when we did a little preliminary talk, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about are your politics, which I think you've outlined them fairly well for us. But if you want to talk a little bit more about that, but also the idea again of solutions, the idea again of supporting a movement that by nature is protesting the way things are, but is also in need, I think, more and more as we mature and keep growing into transitioning more into actual, building, like you said, you were talking about on a small level, getting in your community and switching a car over, creating a garden, etc. So your thoughts on that?
Okay, I need to catch up because we didn't answer the media question. We didn't answer the media question, and I do want to talk about that, but we could come back. So, this question was my politics. Okay. Well, I've kind of run the whole course. I've always been fairly liberal by disposition, and I never really thought that much about isms or movements or anything. For most of my adult life, I didn't vote, because I just didn't see. I tend to be fairly observant, and I didn't see where it really mattered. And then I think at about the time of the first Bush presidency was maybe the first time I voted. And so I kind of voted in state and local stuff. But I also do a lot of reading, back to the history and everything. And I think pretty much our political system is a sham. And I did vote in the last election, and I think it was my last gasp effort, and I was like, yeah, I'm 100% convinced it doesn't matter now. And I can go into great detail. So here's like my perfect example of why it doesn't matter. All the crap that's happening, all the laws that are passed, everything, the freaking drones, everything, we voted those people in. And that's the result of voting. say what you will, and there's all kinds of arguments around that. You go, oh, we need to vote better people in. Well, fine. Where are they?
Yeah.
Show them. Well, where are they? But I'm just saying, the end result of voting is what we have. So I am suspect about its viability. I've been reading just an enormous amount of the history of anarchy. And it's one of my favorite topics, in that when you say anarchy out loud, people get this vision, right? And I contest it. A whole lot of people don't really know that much about what they're talking about when they talk about anarchy, including me, because it is such a convoluted and rich thing. But I'm trying to become informed about it. So where I am politically, I think being informed and operating on a local level and running parallel to the existing systems might be a way out. So I actually, I kind of figured this question might come up. And, there's a whole anarchy thing about no governments and stuff like that. And I think, actually, I believe, theoretically, a good government could be a good thing. We just don't have any examples of that. But if you had a good structure that fundamentally had the well-being of people at heart, and did what they were supposed to be doing to take care of the population, and accountable and responsible, and the whole money out of politics and all that, I don't see that would be a bad thing. Not to build a dependency state, but that it's just, the United States is huge, right? It's hard. I mean, okay, fine. Let's smash the state. Who's going to fix the roads? Let's smash the state. Who's going? I mean, you just go. So okay, you go. Well, okay. So there is a need for something. It just needs to be better. But I pretty much subscribe to a fairly liberal position, where we are morally and ethically obligated to take care of ourselves and our people, and that everybody should contribute to that endeavor. I think the economic situation needs to be flattened considerably. You can't have this disparity. It just is no good for anybody. So I would say I'm probably extremely liberal with anarchist tendencies, but I like a little bit of structure and organization when it works right.
Excellent. I think that's a pretty good answer. I think that's a pretty good answer, because if you ask me to come up with a label, it's impossible. I don't think what I want has been invented yet. So, yeah, good answer. And so moving on to, you want to go back and cover the media a little bit, about what we can do better as media, in movement media, in live stream.
Oh yeah, okay. So I'm a pretty harsh critic of movement media in general, because I think we are not using the tools effectively. We have the most powerful and wide-ranging tools of communication available in the history of the universe. And I honestly believe less real communication happening. Nobody knows how to have conversations. I mean, I'm plugged into everything, just like you are, and just like everybody is. But I'm here to tell you, Twitter is not a conversation. Live stream doesn't substitute for direct experience. These interviews are good because at least it's like face to face, and it's human, and you get to hear the voice and the body language and the nuance and the subtlety. But it's still not the same as sitting at a table with you, or having a drink on a porch with you and batting around ideas. So I think we have these great set of tools to organize, to educate, to share information, and they're used for so much BS, and it's tragic, because we're wasting this great opportunity, because we could do better. Our challenge in the movement, and all progressive and left, liberal movements, our challenge is to take control of the narratives, because we
Yeah.
get our asses kicked every day in that.
Yeah.
And people disagree with me on this, and I go, okay, like the other night we did the call-in show, and it was great, and it was fun, it was productive, and somebody had mentioned it. I said, well, this is great, and this is what we need to do, but we need to get much further beyond the bubble here, because, we have, maybe if you add up the channels that were mirroring us and everything, several hundred people that were listening and participating in one manner or another. And in Missouri, there's this right-wing fundamentalist AM radio station that's hitting 25,000,
Yeah.
50,000, 100,000 people
Yeah.
spewing
There's
nonsense
Rush
at them
Limbaugh. Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah.
And so we are so far behind, and we're behind because I think we squander the opportunity. And
How
I
so?
think all of us,
How so?
well, I think we need to be conscious of content. The people who participate, in the chats and all that, the chats are just, they can kind of devolve into bickering and stuff like that. And it's just, wait a minute, you have this platform where you can have, it's not as good as a face-to-face conversation, but you can have, you can exchange ideas, and then you can take those away and think, so why are we wasting it arguing about, the color of the paint on the flagpole at the White House or whatever. And, it's much worse than that. But it's just, the tools could be used better, and we could have more face-to-face conversations. We need to work on distribution. And we need to work on accessibility, social and economic accessibility of the media, because this, what we're doing, and what just generally anything that's internet based presupposes
That you have a
access
connection
that
and
does
computer.
not exist.
Yeah. Well, to a
You
lot
know,
of the people that need the access the most, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, there's the challenge, and what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
And if you want to extrapolate it all out, and I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so surely somebody else has thought about this. But if the powers that be wanted to squash the movement, all they got to do is pull the plug. If the internet goes down, what's next? And when is it next?
Darknet.
It would take a lot of scrambling for people to develop an alternative. So I think we should use our tools much more effectively, and we should use them for good instead of evil. We should use them to be supportive and helpful and exchange. There should be information clearinghouses, and so, I mean, this gets back to the library question, right? If you're in an area with no library, the internet's it's the Alexandria library of our time, but you have to wade through all the crap to get something substantive. So why, as media people, don't we take it upon ourselves to build information exchange libraries, so that if you want to know something about the Supreme Court, instead of slogging through everything, there's a resource that you can go to. Like if you think about Wikipedia scaled down, where people could consolidate information and make it easy and accessible. Mm-hmm. And it also needs to be without so much glitz and glamour overhead. When we interviewed Keith McHenry, the Food Not Bombs website is awesome. And I said, who did that? Because it is so basic and simple, but it is like a gold mine of information. He said, oh, we do it ourselves. I said, it is so simple and basic. He said, well, a whole lot of people we need to be talking to got nothing but dial-up, so they can't, we're trying to get them information. So we're looking at what's the most easy, straightforward, accessible way we can deliver the information. And I said, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not pretty to look at, but it's effective. And it's developing and changing our standards and figuring out who it is that we want to speak to. My favorite example is I want to talk to some little 52-year-old blue hair in Hoodwink, Kansas.
Yeah, who probably doesn't spend a lot of time on live stream.
Exactly. And, my mom might be watching tonight, so if she is. Hi, Mom.
Hi,
my
Artister's
mom. My little 80-year-old mother is like, I have her computer and all that. We do the email. She's the world's greatest user because she does exactly what I tell her to do, the way I tell her to do it. And so I talk to her and she says, "Oh, when is your show?" I said, "Wednesday night." She says, "I think I might tune in." So I hope she's watching
I
so
hope
she can
she
get a
is too,
taste of
and I
this.
hope she's very proud of you. That's awesome.
That's the people we want to speak with. That's the
Yeah.
people we want to bring in. We want to bring people in, inner city, urban areas with no access. We need to be. I mean, it's outreach, right? And our media outreach is so far as I can see, limited to the people who have the luxury of accessibility, and we need to figure that out. That was a long answer.
It was a good one, though. I want to go through a couple more of these. You guys, I'm really sorry because the time is flying, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to ask a lot of these questions, and they're really great. Um, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? I think that's Rise PDX. I'm not sure.
Hey, that's a really
Oh
good
no, that
question
was. Do you think you'll
because
get through all these questions? That was Rise PDX.
um, if I think if I wasn't, I mean, all my creative energy goes into this. I mean, I don't make any other kind of art. I also do, like, I do puppets and do puppet shows and write and produce and do projection shows and stuff like that. And people are like, "When are you going to do another one of those?" Local people who are used to, I would try to do two or three shows a year and they're very elaborate and they take a lot of time. And I just don't have that many hours in the day. So if I wasn't doing OPN, I would probably go back to that because I have shows to write and produce in mind. A lot of it's from outgrowth of this experience, right? I've become much more radicalized working with this because just of the amount of information that I've been exposed to and digesting. So I would go back to doing flying lessons and puppet shows and just stuff like that, and probably a lot of little local community activism. I mean, we started a free store this winter and we're about to start another community garden. And I'm actually I started a small collective here, and we're going to host an artist residency with an artist from Detroit whose issues are food justice. And we're going to do these. So can I tell this story? This is like completely off topic, but
Of course,
kind of,
it's your
kind
birth.
of.
It's your anniversary here. You and the
So
rest.
we're gonna do this residency program. We're bringing an artist from Detroit we met this fall, and she's coming down. Her name is Jessica Freelinghausen, and her thing is food justice and communication. Oddly enough, like she's really interested in communication. So our idea was we're going to do these things called plant backpacks, where we would go to thrift stores, get backpacks, tear them apart, make planters out of them, and then people could carry them around with live seedlings in them. So you learn how to nurture, and then the end of it was going to be this parade to the local community garden. And everybody transplant it, and we'll have a party, and then the community garden serves a soup kitchen. So that was the premise. Well, we've gone to a couple of the schools in the county and just said, "Oh, would you be interested in us doing something with the kids?" And so it's blown up. And I live in this area that has like these little textiles manufacturing places. So we actually have a school that wants us to work with the whole school. The local little textile factory is going to give us the factory for 3 days. They are going to fabricate and produce all the backpacks from
Wow.
scratch from a pattern that we
Wow.
make so that they can get all the families and everything. And then there's going to be there's going to be like 300 or 400 of these things and this huge parade of everybody in the school. And the
Wow.
county agricultural extension agency has given us a piece of land. They're preparing it for a community garden. They're putting a greenhouse in and all that.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's coming up in the last week of April, first 2 weeks of May. So
Oh, that's
that's
fantastic.
so I'm doing that, even though I'm doing OPM. So I'm going to try to get a bunch of material and share it on OPN around that. But the answer to the question is that's the kind of stuff I would be doing if I wasn't doing OPM.
And is doing even while he's doing OPN. So there you go. Okay, so I've pretty much scanned through. I think we've covered most of the general topics of the questions on the pad. I'm also watching the chat, and guys, I need help. I need to know if there are any other burning questions that we need to talk about, or artist, or if you think I've left anything important out. I want you to jump in and add some more words because I think we're going to be hitting the 2 hour mark soon, and I want to make sure everything important. I don't care if we go over, but I want to make sure everything that you want to say or that people want to know gets covered in the next couple of
Yeah.
minutes.
Well, while we're waiting for stuff to pop up in the chat, and if you can catch that, then that would be great.
Yeah.
And I'll just, I want to thank you for doing this.
Oh, my
And I want
pleasure.
to thank all the people who are watching and participating and all the people who have put stuff on the pad. And I don't know that any of our guests are watching, but I think some of them have been. And I want to thank them. And the thing that if you guys take nothing else away from tonight, I mean, all of you, I mean, people ask me all the time, wow, how can you do flying lessons? Wow, how can you do that? I know for a fact that I'm nobody. I'm nothing special. I don't have a special skill set. I don't have hardly anything. I just do the best I can with what I have. And I'm very fortunate in having come from a background of people who were do-it-yourselfers and makers. Everybody repaired their own equipment. That you did not know how to do anything was not an obstacle to trying to do it. And so I want to leave everybody with at least this thought to ponder on at 3 a.m, that you are capable of doing so much more than you might imagine, and that you should try anything that you're compelled to do. You should try. You have to believe in yourself, and you do have to trust your cape. And you're going to try to fly sometimes, and you're going to fall on your face, and so what? You're probably not going to die. But you can never guess whose life you might make a positive difference in. And so we got to get up and do the best we can and try to help each other out. But don't think you have to let any of this stuff, don't leave it to an expert. Don't leave it to a power that be. Don't leave it to an authority figure. Do not get up in the morning and say, somebody has to solve these problems. Just take a hold of something and do what you can, because you're smart enough, you're talented enough, you're good enough, you're healthy enough, you can be motivated enough, and any contribution you make to the greater good is going to benefit, even if you don't know it. And it doesn't matter. We don't need to know it. We just need to do it because it needs to be done. And I want to encourage everybody to do that. If I can't do anything else with this channel, I just want people to be encouraged and empowered and think you can do stuff and try to do stuff. So that's, because when I teach, you guys see the logo, right? It's all cardboard and Sharpie and masking tape, and that's what I do. And when I teach, I'll be doing a class or a seminar or something, and I don't teach all the time, but I do these like regular gigs, every so often. I live for people to say, well, anybody could do that. And I go, you're exactly right. Yeah. Anybody can do it, and you should do it, but you're not doing it, so why don't you do it? Because, anybody can do it better than me.
The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to learn. The worst thing, no matter how hard you fail, you're going to learn. So, and you're going to hopefully involve others. So, amen. Amen to that. Yeah. I feel like I just heard the best song that was so great that I almost can't listen to anything else right now. That was what you just said is what everything is about to me. So, amen to that.
Yeah, we're conditioned, and our human spirit is just beat out of us and educated out of us. Yeah. And we got the most powerful thing we can do is reclaim that.
Yeah.
If and everybody has different interests, and they're all. I mean, they're all good. Just go. You don't. If you're not a gardener, you don't have to plant a garden, but you can do something else, and then you can trade. For vegetables or something. But do something and contribute. I want to just share. Uppity One, who I mentioned earlier, and I talked, about something some time ago, and she said this, and it kind of burned into my memory. Um, she said, I think the best we can do is read a book, plant a garden, and try to help our neighbors out. And I'm like, that's a hell of a good place to start. And don't be afraid, because no matter what happens, if anything's to change, somebody has to go first. Somebody has to go first. You have to be willing to be made fun of. You have to be willing to fail. But nothing's ever going to move if somebody doesn't go first. And so, if we all go first, then big stuff's going to happen. If you guys want to go first, I'll hold the door open for you. So
Everyone is. I think this group we have here tonight is all. We're all going first together. So
yeah.
yeah.
So well, that's good, and I I can wrap on that. I mean, it's like some ungodly hour of the night where you are. So
Yeah. Night is young always with you. Hey, listen, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to work with you tonight. And I want to thank you deeply for everything you've done for this movement, for citizen journalists, and for the people you work with, the inspiration that you give, the help that you've offered, the information that you've shared. It means something. It's out there. You've touched hundreds and hundreds and thousands probably of people, and that's going to continue happening. I'm really, really honored to be your friend. I'm really honored to work with you. I'm really honored to be here tonight, and I'm really, really especially honored that I got to be the one to interview you. So thank you for having me. Everybody who's watching, thank you for being here. Thanks for your excellent questions. And if there's nothing else that's pressing, I think I will let everyone go.
Wrap it up and take it out. So you guys go out there. You know the deal. Call to action is do good works.
Do good works.
That's it.
And tune into OPN. Once again, I really want to thank the rest of the OPN team: Zena, Suze, Clearly, Grey Dog, Ping, Uppity, Krishna is Love, and Stratnimbus. They're essential to making the shows go down here. They all do a tremendous job, and they're incredible activists and people. I know most of them very well. And thank you for participating in this huge media journey with us as we all try to figure this out. Okay, so love to everybody who's out there. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for being awesome, DJ. It was wonderful. And
Right
thank you all you guys out there. I love you dearly, and I mean that sincerely. Even the people I have disagreements with and all that, just remember we all want the same thing, and if we can remember that, then we can figure out how to get along. So thanks a lot.
Okay, good night, everybody. See you later.